you killed Cyril Ogilvy Hamilton. Philip Lombard, that upon a date in February 1932, you were guilty of the death of 21 men, members of an East African tribe. John Gordon Mackenzie, that on the 4th of January 1917, you deliberately sent your wife's lover, Arthur Richmond, to his death. Anthony James Marston, that upon the 14th day of November last, you were guilty of the murder of John and Lucy Combs. Thomas Rogers and Ethel Rogers, that on the 6th of May 1929, you brought about the death of Jennifer Brady. Lawrence John Wargrave, that upon the 10th day of June 1934, you were guilty of the murder of Edward Seaton. Prisoners at the bar, have you anything to say in your defense?
Doctor! I only fainted, Rogers. I'm sure she'll be fine. Narracott, will you get my bag from my room?
Yes, of course.
Stout fellow. Marston, in a moment I'll want help to get her to her room. Of course. Behind the kitchen, is it, Rogers?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. You can use that door.
Thank you, Mr. Narracott. I am in your debt.
Now, Rogers, tell us about that extraordinary voice.
It was Mr. Owen, sir. In his letter, he wrote to me to put it on the gramophone once you were all settled in here after dinner.
That was Mr. Owen's voice?
You doubt that it was?
No. I thought I recognized it. I'm sure I'm mistaken.
A disgraceful practical joke.
You think it was a joke?
What else could it be?
I will need to hear more evidence before offering an opinion.
Mr. Marston and I carried Mrs. Rogers to her room. I gave her a mild sedative. She's resting comfortably.
Whoever it was on that recording, that person knows or has taken the trouble to find out a good deal about us all. He was correct about Seaton. I presided at the trial, but all I did was execute a guilty man.
I remember the case. As I recall, there was some talk.
Happily, guilt and innocence are decided by those of us qualified to make a judgment, not by gossip. Of course, there is one omission in that recording. Mr. Narracott, of course. Although to hear Mr. Blore tell it, he might have earned a place on that list had Mr. Owen been so inclined.
Any truth to the accusation against you? It's a matter of interpretation, you understand. But I'd have to say, yes. Will you tell me how it happened? Elderly woman. Poor devil. I'd been up all night with an emergency case. My nerves were shot, hands shaking. But I had to operate. I had to try and save her. I had a pick-me-up or two to steady myself, but I bungled it. It wasn't the drink, I swear. It was an accident. Could have happened to anyone in my profession.
What brought you here to Shipwreck Island?
Owen sent me a note, asking me to have a look at his wife, who's been suffering from arthritis and muscle spasms.
What was the gossip concerning the Seaton case?
I'm not one to spread gossip to just anyone about a man as distinguished as Justice Wargrave. If I was certain about it, perhaps. But I'm not.
Thank you for your time, Doctor. Any truth to the accusation against you?
The name sounded vaguely familiar. I expect it will come to him.
What brought you here to Shipwreck Island?
Got a wire from a pal of mine, Badger Barkley. Surprised me at the time because I had an idea the old horse had gone to Norway. Told me to roll up here.
Thanks, Marston. Any truth to the accusation against you?
There isn't a word of truth in it. Miss Brady was always in poor health. Always. From the time we came to her.
Will you tell me how it happened?
There was a storm, as fierce as the one brewing outside right now when she was taken bad. The telephone was out of order. I went for the doctor on foot, but he got there too late.
Were you mentioned in the will?
Barely. Certainly not what we were led to believe. She was just saying it, you see, to ensure our devotion to her. Beg pardon. I'm not sure what came over me just then. The strain of tonight, I expect, and worry over Mrs. Rogers, of course.
What brought you here to Shipwreck Island?
Isn't that obvious, sir? My wife and I were hired through an agency in Plymouth. Manservant, housekeeper, cook, that's what we are.
Very kind of you to give me your time, Mr. Rogers. Any truth to the accusation against you?
I remember Seaton perfectly well. Playwright, not a very good one. Charged with the murder of a chorus girl. He was very ably defended and made a good impression on the jury. Nevertheless, it was clear to me he'd done it.
I appreciate your candor, Judge. Any truth to the accusation against you?
About that child, Cyril Hamilton. I was nursery governess to him.
Will you tell me how it happened?
I'd like to tell you. Cyril was forbidden to swim out far. One day, my attention was distracted. I couldn't get there in time. It was awful. But it wasn't my fault. At the inquest, the coroner exonerated me. Oh, and his mother. She was so kind. If she didn't blame me, why should this awful thing be said?
Are you sure you're telling me everything?
I'm telling you all I'm going to, Mr. Narracott.
What brought you here to Shipwreck Island?
I was engaged through an agency to be Mrs. Owen's secretary. Nothing remarkable in that, is there?
A good evening to you, Miss Claythorne. Stay safe. Any truth to the accusation against you?
Fellow got hold of a detestable rumor, nothing more. Arthur Richmond was one of my officers. I sent him on a reconnaissance, he was killed. Natural course of events in wartime.
I am indebted to you for your help, General Mackenzie. Any truth to the accusation against you?
Owen did his research well. The accusation is absolutely true. I don't see that you've earned the right to any details, though.
Will you tell me how it happened?
It was written up in the papers at the time. A story of self-preservation, pure and simple. A hunting party lost in the bush. The great white hunter checks the food supplies, assesses his chances, and clears out on his own.
Leaving 21 men to die.
Not very Pulka Sahib, I'm afraid.
What brought you here to Shipwreck Island?
Owen's attorney, a man named Archibald Morris, rang up one day. Wanted to give me 100 guineas to join this house party. I was to put myself at Owen's disposal in case my rather specialized talents were required.
What